You got your mama's sunshine, you got your daddy's rain. You're like a piece of heaven in a hurricane.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Off the Mountain Podcast. This is Josh, and I'm with Pastor Tom, Pastor Ron, and Vince, and we are the crew. And we're going to talk today about difficult people. We all have difficult people in our lives, and we have to figure out how to handle and how to work with people that we don't always like to work with, right? You don't get to choose who you work with. Literally, you don't get to choose who you go to school with. You don't get to choose who your family members are. You do get to choose your relationships, but sometimes relationships become difficult as well, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're going to talk about that. But first, I just want to say thank you so much for listening and so much for sharing this podcast with your friends and family. It has been more successful than we even imagined.
Well, and we're getting letters and texts and emails, and you know what? It does mean a lot to us.
It does.
We've gotten them from, North Carolina, from different states. Vince, you have the map of where people are from.
Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, all the way to the down under, Australia, and we are saying people from Hawaii are listening, and East Coast, thank you so much. So yeah, so many listeners, and all the people that give shout outs on YouTube, all of our local listeners and people far, like that's so awesome.
Yeah, I just want to say a quick thank you to Kathy Cisco, who wrote us a really encouraging note. She works at Grimway Farms. And a lot of you guys don't know, in Bakersfield, we have the two largest carrot producers, I think, in the world.
In the world.
Yeah. And Grimway's one of them. And so we just want to say thank you so much for listening. And she said she's starting a Bible study at her work.
Yes.
So,
and again, every
pretty cool.
single response we get means something to us. And we've got several lately, so thank you.
And we talk about Bible studies. We talk about God. We talk about Jesus. We are Christians. We all work at a church. But this we designed this, and we hope that you guys, that anyone can listen to this and get something out of it. We want to give something of value in each episode. And
like you said earlier, we're not trying to get rich. Obviously, we don't get paid for this thing.
No.
You said we do get lunch every week.
We do.
Yes, we get lunch catered. And my mom actually packs a bag. My mom.
This is all true, by the way.
It is.
True. This is my dad, by the way. Pastor Ron's my dad. I'm Josh Vietti. So my mom, Debbie Vietti, packs a bag with turkey and cheese.
Yep.
And
sometimes some pickles,
sometimes
sourdough
pickles,
bread, and a
some
few packs of chips.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. It's great. So
we appreciate it.
We have to make our own.
We make our own. Yeah. I get judged by how much mayonnaise I put on it. You know what I mean?
Well.
Anyway, so difficult people. Where do you guys want to start with this?
Well, you know what? Weekly, we come into contact with difficult people. Rude, insulting, maybe grumpy, aggressive, maybe some bullies and bitter people. They could be your neighbors, your employees, your employer, relative spouses. Yesterday, or last week, I was in 3 or 4 different places of business. And in 2 or 3 of those, I had to deal with people that should not be at the front desk. I mean, they're just, some people, bless their hearts, are just flat rude. They look miserable. But yesterday I was at a place of business, and the lady was smiling, and it was just so refreshing. And I went up to her when it was my turn at the window, and I said, you know what? I love your smile. You're just changing this whole atmosphere. And so very often, you go into places of business, places that don't have to compete with other people. Maybe they're run by the government or whatever. And sometimes it's just amazing how rude people can treat you. So daily and weekly, we're coming into contact with these difficult people.
It's funny. If I'm having a good day and I've set my mind right in the morning, which is the thing, right? I mean, it is. If you wake up in the morning and you're running late, you're stressed out, you're worried about everything that is happening that day, and then you run into somebody randomly who is rude, you just want to freak out on them, right? You want to just maybe give them a certain...
You want to become that difficult person.
Yeah, a certain gesture, or, you see people honk. Have you seen somebody in the... it's happened to me a few months ago, actually a couple of years ago. I remember it so well, even though it happened a couple of years ago. I was on a normal street, a normal city street, and the light turned green, and I saw it turn green, and I was just tired that day. I think I was just slow. I just wasn't moving very quickly. I'm not kidding. 3 seconds passed, and this guy just lays on his horn. And I'm sitting there thinking, what is wrong with that? What happened there.
Are you sure it
right?
was just 3 seconds or was it like 10?
It wasn't long at all. Was it you? It was you. Wasn't
It might have been
Yeah.
me.
I'm telling you, I was in LA a few weeks ago, and there was a woman behind me, and I started to realize she's honking. And I'm looking, but we're in traffic on Wilshire Boulevard, and there's 5 cars in front of me. And I'm like, this not doing anything for me.
Right.
Because she's behind me and I have my truck so no one could see her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm not doing nothing wrong. And pretty soon you start finding yourself getting mad, right? You're like, why can't
Oh, just
no.
the other day,
Yeah.
I did that. I honked at someone because the light was green.
Right.
And your mother doesn't like it. She says, why'd you do that? I said, man, they were there 10 seconds. I mean, somebody has to help them, help them out. But your mother's been telling me for a long time. Our church is on the east side of Bakersfield. And she said, Ron, these people are so cool and patient over here on the east side. Because in Vegas, if you set 3 seconds, like you say, you get honked at.
Yeah.
I set at a light the other day I set almost all the way through it. I was looking at my phone.
Wow.
I was on the east side. The person behind me never honked.
Wow.
I mean, and you really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think we ought to have different
They were
kind-
probably on their phone too.
Everybody was just chilling. Yeah.
I think we should have different kind of horns.
Yeah.
I want to invent this. A horn, horns sound so harsh.
Right.
But a horn that goes, excuse me, real nice.
Right.
Why can't we have different horns? And other ones that go, get out of the way, real deep horn.
I tell my kids when they need to be polite that they have to have an English accent and say, pardon me,
Right.
So that would be
well, but
perfect
that's
for-
so true because text, they say that when you send a text doesn't have a, there's like no emotion. You can't read emotion
Right.
through a text,
No
right?
tone.
No tone, right? And same thing with the horn. Sometimes it's just like, hey, excuse me. But really the person in the front seat is, all they hear is, get out of the way,
I
you beep.
think it's an invention that needs to be
That's funny.
made.
Yeah, there are
For
a
example, we're in the mountains up here, off the mountain. It comes from the mountain.
Right.
And occasionally, because it's kind of a curvy road part of the way, some people are courteous and they pull over. And it still sounds kind of harsh because you honk twice, say thank you, but
Right.
gank, I still think it ought to be, thank you,
Right.
excuse me,
Right.
or get out of the way. Like our horns, we ought to have different kinds of horns.
Or at least
on
change
our
the-
vehicles.
change the tone
Change
of
the
the-
tone, change the
All
harshness.
right. If you're an
of it.
inventor out there, we will team up with
Share
you.
your
Yeah.
share your profit with us,
Yeah.
please.
Well,
Yeah,
Vince and Josh may be too young to remember this, Pastor. Remember when the Roadrunner car came out and went beep, beep?
Yeah.
You can't take that serious. It's something
You
does
can't-
that.
Is that
you can't
real?
get mad.
That was a real horn?
That was
Yeah.
beep, beep.
Wow, that's
I used
funny.
to have we called them Ooga horns on my 57 Chevy. Ooga.
No way.
Yeah, I had
And
like,
what would they would just that was just for fun or
just for fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Just a different tone.
So really, let's go back to toxic
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, so I mean, most of our issues are not with random people; they're with people that we encounter daily or weekly, right?
Right.
And there's different types of people. There are people that that you have a relationship with that are offering a service, like a doctor, or it could be I don't know, like what do you guys people that offer services?
I had
Anybody that-
regrets because I quit going to a doctor friend of mine.
right.
But her front office was so rude every time I called. And finally I said, you know what? I love you, but your front office is just something else.
Yeah.
And I said it 2 or 3 times. I didn't feel like they took it seriously. And I gave up my relationship with that doctor.
Yeah.
It's so important. Toxic people, they're usually unhappy people, I think. I mean, we're talking about people that maybe were raised in a home, a dysfunctional home, and it's become habitual to act that way, and you feel like it's normal. Others we come into contact with might just be having a bad day.
Right.
Maybe others might be bitter with life. Life hasn't worked out the way they think it should have. And then again, people take it personally sometimes. Maybe you remind them of somebody they don't like. Maybe you're a Christian, they don't like Christians. Maybe it's the way you dress, they don't like you. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons, but we have to learn how to get along with these toxic people. Our life's going to be miserable for us.
One of the things that I have been taking seriously is this idea that most of my extra time should be offered to my family first, right? My immediate family, my wife and my kids, because I'm raising the kids. I mean, I don't have to explain that, right? And so what I've realized is that in order to say yes to them, I have to say no to a lot of other things. And so when I think of like difficult people, I think of people that are just people. Sometimes like I don't really have anybody specifically that's like, oh, that person's terrible. I just have different people in my life, and you know, people want relationships with and outside of your family, and that's okay. But I think you have to limit those things, and you have to get ahead of it. We call these boundaries, right? That's one of the big topics, one of the big words that are thrown around a lot. And I think it gets misunderstood, but it was explained to me pretty clearly not too long ago what a boundary actually is. They said it's like a fence. It's like a fence, and this is your yard, and you decide what is in your yard and what is outside of your yard, and you decide who you let in your yard and who you don't. And that's difficult, but I think it's a survival skill as well. I mean, if you we're watching this zombie show, this Last of Us show, right? And they just had an episode about these guys, and they built a boundary because they want to keep the zombies out, right? And this is an extreme idea, but the idea is that they had to build this big fence, and they said, no, you can't get in unless you're the right person, and they give the right person the code, and it's a silly analogy, but you have to be careful with your own heart, and you have to be careful with your own time.
Josh, you only have so much emotional energy, and you can't let these toxic people deplete your energy. You want to save it for other things. And I think that's one of the keys of what we're talking about today. You guys have been around me for a long time. I usually come up with some kind of acrostics or whatever. And I think if you really get what I'm going to say right now, it's really going to help you, because this has helped me enormously. And I've had 3 rules, and I finally just put them to an acrostic today. Remember the old RCA brand?
Yeah.
Of phonographs and all that stuff. Do they still?
Tube radios. They still make some TVs and stuff.
RCA.
Yeah, great.
Well, here's what I've come up with in dealing with toxic people. RCA. The R stands for you have to make a decision to refuse to let them steal your joy.
Oh, that's good.
Okay. And the C is you have to choose sometimes ahead of time how you're going to respond to toxic people. And the A is activate some boundaries. I use this when I'm dealing with toxic people. First, for example, I come into a relationship with a toxic person. First thing that I want to go off in my mind, I want it to go off, is that I've been warned. Don't let them steal my joy. Don't let them deplete my emotional energy. So I make up my mind. It's already made up that no one's going to steal my joy today. And then number 2, I have to choose how I'm going to respond. And I want to talk about that more. Am I going to smile? Am I going to walk away? Am I going to override their negative with positive? And then this activate boundaries is so important, because very often I'm dealing with a toxic person, and sometimes I'll look over their shoulder at a clock or whatever, and I'll go, I'm going to give them 10 minutes, and I'm not going to interrupt them. I'm going to smile and listen. And these 3 rules has helped me tremendously. I give acrostics and things like that very often. Is that the right word I want to use, acrostics?
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
I think you ought to have a book of acrostics, maybe, and go how to deal with bitter people, how to activate faith, how to pray successful prayers, and be able to flip through these acrostics are so important. So I want to talk more about this, but let you guys jump in here.
I like what you said about not letting people steal your joy, because I think a lot of times when you come in, when you come across people that are toxic or difficult, I think a lot of it is up to you on how much they actually rob from you in those moments. When somebody is going to choose to, you get a bad clerk at a gas station or something, and, they're being difficult. I think you have to choose how you're going to respond in that moment. If you feed into that energy, if you feed into their toxicity, if you feed into that, that thing that they're wanting you to engage. Because most people that are toxic or have an attitude, they want you to engage in that attitude. They're not doing it just, they want you to come down to their level.
That's how fights happen in the street, all that stuff. It's like 2 people that are undisciplined.
But how
what are you pulling up a video or something?
No, I had a thought for the day. Someone just sent this to me.
So good.
It doesn't have everything to do with this topic, but it kind of does.
I love it. Yeah.
Can I give it? Can I just kind of?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm getting us totally off the subject.
That's right.
No, this is on the subject because about fighting. Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
It's good.
It's a picture of 2 little boys, and it's an old-fashioned picture, and they're just exchanging punches. And it says, never fight until you have to. But when it's time to fight, you fight like you're the 3rd monkey on the ramp to Noah's Ark, and brother, it's starting to rain.
So good.
And so I know Josh wants to get back to the topic.
No, I like that. I can transition that back into what we're talking about, because you do have to fight for your own life. You do. You have to fight for your own life.
Yep.
But so many of us, and I was included in this, so many of us, and you guys are going to hear me talk about this a lot because I really am in believing in this. So many of us don't even have our values written down. We don't even know what our values are. So we don't know what we're protecting. So like if you value time with God in the morning, right? Or if you value, some of you might not be believers, you value like a spiritual time in the morning, or maybe it's working out or whatever it is, but you need your own time, right? And some of us, Vince, I know, likes to have time at night. Like he's a night guy, and that's okay. But if you have this time that you value, that you need to kind of fuel yourself up for the day, then when somebody gets in the way of that, when somebody is trying to keep you, or even the thought of somebody trying to keep you from doing that, that's an infraction. And so you have to fight really hard to protect those times. You have to fight really hard.
That's true. And we're talking about fighting. You have to almost look at it this way. This person, if I let them, is going to steal my joy. They're going to deplete me of my emotional energy that I need for my kids and my spouse.
Right. And
I'm not going to let them take that.
Well, the word you just used, energy. We talk about time. We talk about, finances as resources, but we rarely talk about energy. How much energy does it take to be upset with somebody? How much energy does it take to be to think I'm going to show them? Right. So I love Vince is funny when Vince and I, again, I said it last week, we've been best friends since high school. When we get mad at each other, he'll just laugh at one point, and it just kills it. It kills it, and I love that because he's not allowing somebody's anger, my anger, specifically, to bother him. And that's good. That's a good thing.
Josh, that's so funny because I had a friend just like that, just like Vince. And the madder I'd get, the more he would laugh.
And it can go. It can go in the opposite.
Funny.
Yeah, it can go in the opposite direction sometimes. My wife doesn't like when I laugh when she's mad. But
right.
Oh, you got to be careful.
Yeah.
Even me sometimes. When I was younger, decades ago.
Yeah.
I mean, someone would be toxic. They'd be grumpy or whatever, and I would smile. And I was a Christian, so I'd go, hope your day gets better.
Right.
Yeah.
Poke. That was a stab. Really. Right. You can do this in so many ways.
It lets the air out of their anger, their frustration.
But sometimes you can do it too and make it worse with your justifiable little comment,
But I think if when people want you to come, like I said, when people want you to come to that level, when they're being toxic or they're being mean, they're doing their thing. You have to choose in your own mind to not meet it with the same aggression, right? You have to be able to go into that situation. And I think a lot of that comes back to being prepared. A lot of us aren't like, being in your word, praying, meditating, and again, protecting your values, what's important to you. So if you go to the bank and somebody's being completely awful to you, or somebody slams the door in your face, you're able to say, you know what, like, I'm going to smile and I'm going to say, hey, I hope you have a good day, and be able to keep moving and know that they're having a moment, but that's not going to affect your moment.
You said it well, though, and I think we need to think this through. Prepared. I think we need to have in our mind several ideas of what we can do when these toxic people come into our atmosphere.
Oh, for sure.
Day. In other words, I don't think you can decide always on the spur of the moment because your emotions are running. You can either decide before you go, well, I'm going to see toxic people today, and I'm going to smile real big and leave, or I'm going to, say something positive in reaction to their negative thing, or I'm going to walk away as quickly as I can. And I know this is really tough. I like to use this approach, and today's culture makes it very difficult. But I used to like to, if someone was really giving me a hard day, I used to like to go up and just pat them on the shoulder and say, I hope your day gets really good. Today you have to watch for this uninvited touch.
Right.
But it really worked well for me to even go up after a heated conversation, if it's a fellow employee or somebody close, and just put my hand on their shoulder and pat them and say, love you, man.
Well, what did we talk about last week? We talked about opportunity, and what an opportunity when somebody is being that way, or, they have an attitude towards you or whatever they're going through. You have an opportunity to change that moment or change that atmosphere. Have you ever walked into a room and you knew there was some tension? Maybe it was like when you were younger and your parents maybe got in a fight and you're able to go in and be like, so guys, what's for dinner? You're able to break that tension. I know our kids, my wife and I will be talking about something and they'll be like, okay, so what about that family board night? And we just laugh.
You're a thermostat, not a thermometer.
Oh, that's good.
And a thermostat changes the conditions of the air.
Right.
You're not a thermometer.
Well, I think we have to own it. Now, when I mean own it, I think it's a mindset within ourselves. Because you've heard the saying, you have to be a friend to get a friend.
Yes.
You know, I think it's expectation. My expectation when I get up in the morning is that I'm not going to have a confrontation with a difficult person in my house.
Yeah.
I could, and if I do, it's something that, you know, we need to settle right then and there. But if I go out my front door and get in my car, that's where my expectations lower.
They change.
Yes. And so as I go out there, I think your expectation when you're driving to work is that somebody's going to cut me off.
Yes.
Somebody's going to do
Yes.
something. When I get to work, my expectations isn't that everybody's my friend.
I love that, Tom.
And so expectations, if you're out there expecting anything more than people maybe causing you to have a difficult morning with work or a call or an appointment or something that's got mixed up, you're going to the dentist, they got an emergency, expectations can start get lowered because it's not as big. I mean, I can go to my doctor every year for my my annual, and he's gonna be a half hour late, because I know he'll spend a half hour more with me.
Expectations equal peace.
So my expectation of him isn't
Yes.
going to be, oh my gosh, where's he at? He's disrespecting me.
Yeah.
He's going to give me the same care when he gets in there. But when you do meet them, you have to have an expectation of yourself.
Leave your house in the morning going, I am going to meet
Yes.
some toxic people today. It's going to happen, more than likely. And if it doesn't, then
It's a
hey,
mindset.
That's great.
Well, if you get into a place where you're not going to have that, then it is.
Yeah.
But then you do have to be prepared when something
Yes.
doesn't meet your expectation. Because when that happens, what do they say? Anger happens when you have unfulfilled expectations.
Yep.
So if you're going to a meeting and somebody lets you down, then you have to be able to say, well, I can't get angry about this because, you know, this is something I got to own. And I think attitude is something that we
Right.
all have to own.
Yep.
And I know not everybody else is going to, so you have to have skills for when they don't.
What
And it's a
about-
mindset.
What about, and I'm going to ask you guys this, what about people that are nice, right?
Oh, okay.
They're nice, but they are difficult. What I mean by that is some people that are listening to this, they love taking care of needs. They love taking care of people. And then there are some people that are very needy. And it seems like the needy people kind of gravitate towards these people who love taking care of needs. But then what happens is they end up in a relationship, a friendship, or whatever it might be, maybe even a marriage, where it's just totally imbalanced. What would you say to the person that is a good, kind person, but they have somebody in their life that's really needy and they are just taking up too much of their time?
It goes back to what you said, boundaries.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've all had that friend. I have. Pastor Ron knows my friend. He's no longer with us, died with COVID. But my expectations of him after knowing him was he's always going to want more from me than I'm able to give. And I started having to let them know that, you know, this is as far as I can go. So your expectation of me, if you want $100, I might give you 10. You know, I'm not going to leave you empty-handed when you go, but there are people who will keep taking.
Yeah,
and
let's
keep
talk
taking.
about boundaries.
Yes.
The other day, somebody wrote me, and I probably got letters or texts like this probably several times through the last few years. But it goes something like this: Pastor, I need your counsel. My parents don't accept my spouse, and almost every holiday they start insulting her or him. Just start insulting them, little digs. How do I handle this? It's my parents. I said I would have a talk with your parents and say, look, you know, you're making my spouse feel uncomfortable. And I'd have a talk with them. If it continued, I'd say, look, I'm laying some boundaries. We're not going to stop seeing you. We love you. But when we're there in a holiday, you start bad-mouthing them, we're going to leave.
Yeah.
And we'll just say, Mom and Dad, you know, it's probably time to leave. We got other things to do today. And you'll start getting the hint because I'm not going to allow you. There's boundaries here. You cannot sit here and insult my spouse. And if you do, I'm not going to cut you off. I'm not going to, you know, do away with you. I'll keep coming. But every time it goes there, or another one was, you know, my parents, Pastor Ron, they cuss, use bad language in front of the kids.
Right.
Have a talk with them and say, if you do that, we're going to start leaving them less and less and less. There has to be boundaries.
Well, you know what you're talking about, Pastor? You're talking about communication.
Yes.
You've got to have a clear line
Yep.
of communication, and you can't be afraid of a communication because it might spark something. But how are you ever, Pastor, we deal with it all the time, all of us that are sitting at this table. You're talking with somebody where you may not see eye to eye, but if you're allowed to give them your opinion and hear theirs,
Yes.
you might
Yes.
agree more than you disagree.
and hear theirs. People want
Yes.
to be understood before they understand. Josh, in answer to your question, I want to make sure we answered it. Nice people who have are we not answering
No,
that
I think
question?
I think you are. I think boundaries is definitely the answer to the question. My point was, we started talking about the obvious people that
Right.
are difficult. It's almost like they're easier to deal with sometimes
Yeah.
than the people who are not so obviously difficult. People that are needy the needy friend,
Yeah.
or somebody who's just like taking all the time, or trying to take your time, trying to take your focus away from whatever it is that you're trying to focus on.
Do we allow
that's-
people to have bad days?
Absolutely.
And there's people
yeah.
around us that we love,
Absolutely.
but they're going to have bad days,
Well,
man.
that's the
and they're
thing.
gonna,
Like, I hope and pray that my friends are in need. I think I've actually benefited from my friends more in the past couple of years than they've benefited from me in a lot of ways. But that is a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah,
It's
right.
a normal relationship. That's
Right.
okay.
Yeah,
Like,
but
it's
you're
not-
you're taking a chunk of time. Like you mentioned your friends. I can just talk about our relationship. Early on, when I was in my 20s, it was the other, like you said, it was different. So it's like balance, and that
Yeah.
there's a give and take. But I love what you said about people that can be nice, and you even said being married. And Tom, you mentioned communication, because I do think that is, when you're talking about difficult people, I think our inability to actually communicate with one another is what causes a lot of problems. I love what Warren Buffett said this. He said, if you can't communicate, it's like winking at a girl in the dark. Nothing happens. You can have all the brain power in the world, but you have to be able to transmit it. And transmission is communication. And I think a lot of times, we might be winking at one another. We might be doing all these things. We think we understand one another, but we're not really listening to what our actually needs are. And a lot of that leads to a lot of difficult situations where, you have these people, like you might have somebody that's really nice in your life. And like you said, they're really needy, but have you actually communicated what you guys are moving towards and what your goals are and what your mission? Because somebody can be an energy vampire, as we call them, in your life. But if there's not a clear understanding of where you guys are going with that relationship or where you're going with that situation, if you're married and you're having problems and you feel like each other's needy and you don't have clear expectations like we talked about, and you don't have clear communication, then you're going to continue to be down that needy path or continue to go down that difficult path because you're not communicating.
Let me ask you a question. Now let's come from the Christian perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Is it ever God's will for us to meet toxic people? Is it ever God's will? Would God even set up some of those situations where we meet toxic people? And for what reasons would he do that?
I think one in the Bible, Pastor, when Nabal and David met.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Joseph.
There was somebody in David, right? Is that a true story?
Yeah.
Where Abel and David met, and Nabal was mean or disrespectful to David. David took it personal, but they had somebody that intervened.
Abigail.
You have an intervention.
Well, I think the easy litmus test for that is this person in my life right now, are they being used by God to bring me closer to him, closer to my purpose, closer to my calling, or are they pushing me away? And I think if the person is pushing you away from your relationship with God, you got to nix that. You got to walk away from that relationship.
Well, in the story of Joseph, we just talked about stories in the Bible. Who was difficult? Was Joseph difficult, or were the brothers difficult, or were they both difficult?
I think both. Yeah.
Right. It's an
I think
interesting,
both,
right?
yeah.
Like they both, like the brothers thought Joseph was difficult because look at
What's
this
that?
guy and his
It's called
and his fancy.
perspective, isn't it?
Let's go back to that question that I asked Josh.
Braggy.
We got to remember that God is in the process of building character in us.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to start looking like Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be times where God says, I want you to be in the presence of this toxic person. Number one, because they treat everybody bad. And I want to see someone filled with my spirit to go in and love them, even though they're bad to them, because no one else will love them. And I believe you will, but also to test your patience, give you practice being godly. I think somebody's ordered by God.
And I don't disagree. I don't disagree. Yeah, that's correct. Is that right? Somebody that's really close to me met someone at work who's difficult. And they said, you know what, I'm gonna take this person to lunch. I'm gonna talk to them.
There you go.
And I love that. I really do. But there has to be boundaries set, and probably in your own mind at least before you go in.
Josh, I want to take off on that right there, because if you work with someone that's toxic, they got a bad attitude all the time, whatever. I want to say what you said. Why don't you take them to lunch? Listen to their story.
Yeah.
And you know what? You might change totally. For example, we had a lady in the Vegas church. I mean, I've never seen it quite to this extent being a horrible thing. But she lost all 3 of her children and her husband within a 5-year span. I mean, I can't even fathom this. Now, if you knew that about someone at work that was, you know, really hard to get along with, that's going to change everything.
Right. Yep.
But take them to lunch and say, I want to hear your story. Now, you guys remember when I dressed up like the homeless guy and I laid out in front of the church?
Yeah.
There's a video that they can find on
Vimeo,
on our internet. On Vimeo, you can find this.
Yep.
What do they Google to find this?
Pastor dresses up like homeless.
Okay.
Guy. And we'll leave it in this. We'll leave it in the show notes. We'll leave the link in the show notes.
Please leave that. Well, when I dressed up like this homeless person, I laid out in front, and I don't think too many people knew who I was. And again, we have a video of it. And people came by me. And all of a sudden, the only way I can explain it is I don't know if it's epiphany, a divine moment, a revelation. It was divine. It wasn't normal. As I lay there, all of a sudden, I became a homeless person. And I remember just crying out inside of me. There was something crying out in my spirit that said, I don't want your waters only. I don't want your food. I don't want your money. I want someone to ask me about me. Ask me why I'm here. Ask me about my past. I want to know that I matter to someone. And I think very often some of these people, these toxic people that we're working with or in our neighborhood or whatever, or their relatives, maybe there's something within them crying out, I want someone to care about who I am instead of just put up with me or, you know, treat me with some kind of rehearsed response. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so why not take them to lunch, hear their story, and you might understand them better.
Well, I think that's good, and I think that's true. You just never know what people are going through. Let me ask another question. Kind of keep this going. What about your spouse? What if your spouse becomes a difficult person? How do you handle that person? You guys, and we're 4 guys. You know, we would come from a husband perspective, but also a father perspective. But these, you know, Pastor Tom and Pastor Ron and Vince, we put together a marriage retreat every year. And so you've talked to, and plus you've counseled multiple couples, and it's probably difficult for any type of counseling situation for the counselor to not take a side, because it's probably pretty evident sometimes, like who is being more irresponsible or more difficult. But what would you say to the person that's out there right now who's married? You know, I know it's really difficult because everything is different. Every situation is different. But let's say that the other person is just lightly criticizing them or something. We're not talking about full on, you know, just horrible person who's out cheating and doing all these other things, but somebody who's just, you know, hard to live with. What would you guys say?
Well, you know what perspective I'm going to come from, people could probably guess. I really, really, really believe in the power of prayer. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start praying every day. First of all, that God will open up a door maybe for me to communicate with them and say, hey, sweetheart, lately you've really become this person who doesn't seem to be happy. Let's talk about it. See if you can get to the bottom of it. And while you're praying, because prayer sometimes takes a while to be, you know, not heard. They're heard right away. But sometimes prayer, it takes a while for it to change things. You have to learn some mechanism to survive while God is moving on their heart, which I believe he will over time period if you keep praying. So you might say, you know what, sweetheart, can I help you in any way? You might have to pray for them a lot. When they come in and they start complaining, whatever, maybe God will put you in a season where you go, okay, I might have done that. How can you help me change? Can we pray about it right now? Pray that God will bring to surface what it is that's causing them to be this way. And in the interim period, you might have to learn that when they get in one of these moods, I'm just going to go up and kiss them on the forehead and say, you know what? I'm really going to think about that. I'm going to go fishing. I'm going to go hunting. I'm going to go golfing for a while. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go run some errands. Can I pick up some stuff at the grocery store? You're going to have a lot of patience with them as you pray them through whatever's bothering them. Because again, when you married them, probably they weren't like that.
Yeah.
Or you wouldn't have married them. So I think the bottom line is getting to the root cause of why they're changing and why they're being this way. And while they're changing and you're praying, you're going to have to come up with some, what do I want to call them? Survival techniques.
I can definitely speak from the being the difficult one in a relationship, and my wife wouldn't let up on me. She kept asking me questions. She kept digging, and she would say, "What's up? You know, I know you're not doing well. What's going on?" And that made all the difference for me. And so, for those of you out there that are have a husband who's going through a lot, you don't know what he's struggling with. It could be work stuff. It could be just the pressures of life. I think men have a lot of pressure that women don't see or feel. And also women have a lot of pressure that men don't see and feel, right? And so I heard a teaching a long time ago about Adam and Eve and how after they sinned, the curse, I don't know if I talked about this on the podcast before, but Eve's curse was that there was going to be pain in childbirth, and then Adam's curse was that there's going to be pain in tilling the ground and working the ground. And so this pastor went on to talk about how women will constantly be worried about the home, be worried about the family, be worried about the children, be worried about the safety and the security. And then men will constantly be worried about work and being somebody and bringing home, you know, the money. And I know things are a lot different these days, where I think most of my friends, both the husbands and the wives work. But I think that those deep gnawing, pulling, weight, that definitely has a huge impact on us.
When you're married to someone and they weren't that person when you married them, and they're becoming very critical, very semi-toxic, there is a reason for it.
There is.
You have to get to the root of this, and through love and patience and understanding, I think, and coupled with prayer, I think you could get there. And when it comes out, you can help them get healed.
Something I learned in marriage counseling was that it's okay to have your own life and still be married. And what I mean by that is you can have some hobbies within reason, right? I mean, some guys they're
extreme with it.
Yeah. But you can have your own hobbies, and you can have your time that you need to take a walk or do your thing, but then come back to the family and focus, on what you need to focus on. And I think that so many people are out there running on empty. I think tons of people are out there running on empty. And so it's just, it's going to be, it's perfect ground for issues,
Well, let's talk about that, Josh, because if you're running on empty, that means you haven't been filling the gas tank up.
Right.
And as Pastor Ron says, there's probably a reason if you're looking at your spouse and they are becoming a person that you're not acquainted with, and it's probably something you've done or not doing, right? So communicate.
I can relate to that.
So as Pastor Ron will talk about prayer, communication becomes that tool that Ashley did with you.
Yeah.
So if you're out there and you haven't, and I know our marriage retreats packed up, you've got to invest time in your marriage. And I think that is probably something that if you don't do, you could be married and have a great few years, and all of a sudden you start hitting those marital problems, and you don't start to take care of them by going to a marriage retreat. And then guys and gals, don't be too proudful to come in for an appointment, maybe just a checkup, maybe just a conversation. And guys, I think sometimes there's nothing more that you can do to look at your gal and go, I want to change and I'm praying for change. What do I need to do? Because sometimes that's all our gals want to do, right? They want to hear that my man is willing to change. So if you're not investing in that marriage, you're going to get to a point where you are running on empty because you haven't been filling the tank up. So try to take a little bit of time and fill that tank up. And as you get older, I'm telling you, it doesn't get easier.
Tom, I agree totally with what you're saying, but I want to just clarify one thing. It's not always something you did. Sometimes your spouse's problem could have something to do with something you don't even understand.
Right.
Maybe something reminded them of their past.
Right.
Maybe they were molested when they were younger.
Yeah.
There could be multiple things that maybe you didn't do.
What I also said was not doing.
Yeah.
Not doing
it can be very often that.
The not doing would be the communication.
Well,
I know with my wife, I've got to go home right now. My wife's superintendent of school district. She'll come home.
Right.
And it's almost like who goes first. I can have a rough day. She can have a rough day. But I've talked to her. I said, honey, when the sheriff has been in your office, tell me because you're going first. You know, I'm just saying, because sometimes I'll come in and I can overwhelm the conversation, and then she'll go to bed frustrated because she's
Going back to
not
what I
able to
said, though,
have
very often my
conversation.
wife reminds me, someone will be treating me really weird, and I'm not used to it because usually we're on friendly terms. And my wife will say, Ron, don't always think it's something that you did.
Right.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. A lot of people have a lot of problems that have nothing to do with what
Right.
you
Well,
did.
in my-
Because I used to take it personally a
In
lot.
my case, just to bounce off of that, I was dealing with a deep depression that I hadn't dealt with my whole life. And so I was a bear to live with. I was terrible to live with. And so, you know, that's what was going on for me. And so it was my wife pushing me and my
To
friends
communicate.
and other circumstances that basically led me to get the help I needed. And so, you know, there's lots of different things that people go through. One, I do want to give a recommendation to people, a book. It's actually the book on boundaries, and it's actually called Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend. That book, right? It's everything you need to know about boundaries. And I think they actually came out with a series of other books too. I think they have them for marriages, and they have them for different things. And so I recommend that. Maybe we can put that in the show notes as well.
Yep.
But yeah, learning how to say no so that you can say yes to the important things in your life, I think is a really
boundaries. You
important life
can't
skill.
take everything personal. I have boundaries. I have a nice home, and I got a real nice manicured yard. But there's boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be responsible for how my neighbor, you know, waters their grass, takes care of their yard. My boundaries end at some point.
Right.
And so very often we just have to say, hey, I will do what I can do to heal this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I want it to be better, but I realize there are boundaries and there's only so much I can
There's
do.
a scene in that movie where Will Smith is a soccer coach. What movie is that? What is it called? Oh my gosh, so funny. Anyway, it's him and oh, it's gonna bug me. Anyway, there's a scene where him and his neighbor are going at it because of they're cutting each other's
I know that guy,
shrubs.
the one you're talking about.
It's so funny. Kicking and screaming. That's what it's called. Kicking and screaming. But I just think about that. That's a perfect analogy for boundaries because, yeah, some people, they are a little bit rude or a little bit forceful, and they try to get in your yard. And if you never tell them, you never say, hey, this is, I would prefer you not to come in my yard. You know, if you just allow them to come in all the time, then that's not their fault. You know,
How do you have those difficult conversations with people though? Because I think a lot of times when you try to set boundaries up with people and you say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore.
when you realize how important it is to you that you do.
Right.
Well,
when you have 'em.
conversation's a big one. My wife gets tired of it sometimes because if I have a neighbor issue,
Yeah.
I'll have my wife go over there with me.
Yeah.
After prayer, I will knock on the door, and the person will open the door. My wife goes, "Why am I here? To keep me in line?" Because my wife can do that.
Right.
Well, seriously, you know, and I'll
Right.
just say, "Hey, you know, I think we've got a little bit of issue
So-
going on, and this is what we're going to do." And so I'm blown away how it works itself out through conversation.
me just give it-
No, because I asked
No.
that question because I think there's some stuff you can live with and you don't have to. It's like, okay, I can live with this, and that doesn't need to be the conversation because it can
That's
get
fine.
worse. and
I
then
want
there's-
to
no, right.
answer.
You
Let's
choose
answer
your
Vince's.
boundaries.
Let's answer Vince's question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we get to the place of having that conversation?
Right. Healthy conversation.
Let me use a story that if you've been around me any length of time, you probably heard me use, but my wife has reminded me to take this story and use it as a point of wisdom very often. And again, I think I even shared it on one of the podcasts, but it's a guy who goes on vacation and leaves his cat with his brother. And so while he's on vacation, his brother calls him up and says, "Hey, I want to tell you your cat died while you were gone." And he said, "You're kidding me. I'm having this lovely time here, you know, in the Bahamas. And you just call up and say your cat died. I'm going to talk to you when I get home." So when he got home, he said, "Look, don't ever do that to me again." He says, "What should I have done?" I said, "You should have maybe called me and said the cat's on the roof and he won't come down," and kind of prep me. And then next day, call me back, say the cat's still on the roof. He won't come down. And the third day saying he's still on the roof and we're getting pretty worried now, won't come down. Then you could have told me, "Hey, your cat's dead. You know, he didn't make it." And so again, next year, the guy goes on vacation. He calls home. "How's mom and everybody doing?" He said, "Well, mom's on the roof and won't come down." And so what I'm saying,
Camera guys just
camera
laugh.
guys laughing.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying now, I'm going to answer your question. Very often before we can sit down and have that conversation, you have to prep them.
Yes, you do.
And very often my wife says, "Okay, I know you're going to have a conversation with this person, or you're going to have to maybe fire them, let them go, maybe if things don't change. But you ought to start the whole process of the cats on the roof won't come down. And maybe say, you know what? Say, hey, dude, you're kind of hard on me today. You know, it's going to be hard to get my day back, and leave. And if the next time it happens, go, hey, dude, come on, man, you're putting me in a bad mood. You're kind of prepping them to one day say, we got to talk.
You can go easy.
We got to
go
talk.
easy. You don't have to go hard. And so let me just say this before you even get to that step, Vince.
Right. Okay.
Let me
And it's
just
something I'm asking for our viewers because I think there's a lot of people
let
that
me just say
struggle
this
with these conversations.
for perspective.
Okay.
I've been pretty vocal about my mental health issues, right? And it led me last year to go to a place for a full month. I checked into this place. It was a really cool place up in Washington. And I was in classes every single day talking about mental health. I was with a bunch of other people that were dealing with different life circumstances. These are professional people. These are people that this place basically houses all kinds of different types of people from different walks. And we talked about boundaries and when it pertains to mental health, probably 60% of the time there. So like that was the number one thing that they were talking about at this place, because a lot of people, they allow difficult people, or they allow other people to basically get in their lives and steer them in a way that they don't want to go. That if they have certain values and they know what those values are, then it's much easier to not be steered in the wrong direction. But most people don't even know what their values are.
Sure.
And so learning what your values are, and then learning what you have to protect, and then at that point you don't have a choice. You have to protect it, you know. And when it comes to having a family, obviously huge values to be there for my girls, you know. And so if anybody is like, hey, let's go out, you know, Friday night, but I have a dinner set aside for my girls, and I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hang out with my girls tonight and do that. So like, it's easy to have those talks, and that is setting a boundary right there. That's setting a boundary. Boom. It doesn't have to be this formal, crazy, like we need to sit down and have some coffee and do this thing. Sometimes it could be that, but I don't think it has to be that either. Sometimes you don't even have to have the conversation. You just set your boundaries, and you just
right. And there's, as I said, sometimes you don't have to have the conversation, but I think especially because we just came off talking about your spouse or your other loved one. You know, I love what you said about the cats on the roof, because I think that works a lot, where you're able to come in and ease into a conversation. I know I'm also a person that I'd rather somebody rip the Band-Aid off and say, this is exactly what's going on. Don't beat around the bush. Let's just talk about it and then settle it. Like I want to, and I know that not all people want to do that, and that's aggressive. But I'd rather just settle it so that I can go away and not have to think, hey, we just squashed that, and we're good and we can move forward. So I think, how do you balance those two things out with people? Because I know a lot of people, some people are, let's squash it. Some people are like, let's talk about it. There has to be a middle
know who
ground.
you're dealing with.
Right. Yeah,
know
that's
who
good.
You're dealing with.
Yeah.
Now, you know, me and you, we would have this type of relationship where you say, hey, dude, come on, what's up? Let's talk right now.
I love that our relationship
The old
is that.
Italian style.
Yeah,
you know, come on, dude, let's get with it.
Let's
man.
just talk about it.
Lay it
Right.
on the table.
Yeah.
But let's look at this from a Christian perspective.
Yeah.
In the Christian church, people sing these songs. Make me like Jesus, you know, I want to be like him. You don't expect any toxic people in your life. That's practice.
Right.
That's practice, man.
And Jesus had hard boundaries. And the thing about Jesus, like in Mark chapter 1, we see a story where Jesus had just done all these miracles in Peter's mother-in-law's house, right? Yes. And then it's nighttime. Everyone falls asleep. They wake up really early in the morning, and there's more people wanting to come in and get some of this miracle healer. They need healing, and they don't find Jesus. They can't find him anywhere. He's out praying by himself, getting his instructions from God, and he comes back he doesn't come back. The disciples find him, and he says, we're going to leave now and go to this other town. And that was boundaries. He left all those people hanging.
Right.
Jesus. So if Jesus had boundaries, then we should too, right? And not to kill that too much, but I do have another question to kind of top this off. That's going to throw you guys off probably, but I have one more question. Should I go there? Is there anything else you want to say about
we can
relationships?
go all over the place. Yeah. I still have a few things I want to say, but say what you're going to say and we'll just bring it right back.
All right. So what about our leaders, our political leaders, or the people that run things? You know, how do we? from the president down to the local authorities, down to your boss? How do you deal with people that are in authority over you and you find them difficult?
I think you have to have conversation.
Yeah.
You know, I think Pastor Ron and I have been doing this together for how many years?
Oh, 30 years.
30 years. Have we always agreed?
No.
But I think there's times he's come to me and goes, Tom, what's going on? What's in your head? And I'll tell him. Sometimes I'll go to him and say, am I on the right track? Is there something off? Because relationships, I think, and I love to use Jesus, have a form of becoming difficult within a relationship. I always tell Pastor Ron sometimes in conversations, Pastor Ron's my spiritual mentor. He's my pastor. He's my friend. He's my boss. Sometimes I'll look at him and go, which one are we today? You know, because because each relationship is within the relationship. Jesus had his best friends, and he asked them last night on earth, can you just stay up and pray for me? He went 3 times and went, wow, okay, you didn't pray for me, so let's go. And I think there is this opportunity. I think with our presidential leader, a lot of us don't get a chance to talk to them. No. And so I think we're supposed to pray for them. And Josh, you even said in a meeting last week where I've been having a relationship with somebody that thinks different than we do, does things differently. But as we've talked and we think, we're starting to come more, not in the middle, but we're seeing a Christ likeness bring us more together. And I think we have more that we agree on than we disagree on. So if you take that with the president, you take it all the way down with your boss.
Well, I love that, Tom, because you're willing to team up with somebody who disagrees with you on other issues, but you're willing to team up with them on the issues that you do agree on. Yeah. And that is a sign of maturity that the church lacks.
Josh, okay, let's go back to the question you asked. And let's make it more personal. Let's say it's your boss, your employer, somebody you do have a relationship with. First of all, the Bible says we're to speak the truth in love to one another. And so you got to kind of take time, pray about it. And again, it's not always what you say, but it's how you say it. Yeah. Let's say my boss, I'm having a hard time with him because he's grumpy, he's grouchy, he's being toxic. I might make an appointment and say, sir, when you're busy, when you're free, can I have just a few minutes of your time? Go in and say, hey, I don't know if you've noticed, but our relationship's kind of changed lately. Now, see, you're not accusing him or anything, and you're going, can I just ask you, sir, is it something I've done? And if it's something I've done, can you show me? And you're opening a platform for conversation.
Well, this also takes a lot of self-awareness because when you go to somebody who's in charge of you at work, a boss, you have to take into account that they're paying you. So there's a transaction and they're expecting you to do things that you probably don't want to do. And so you have to ask yourself, is this person treating me unfairly outside of that realm? Because if they're just saying, hey, I want you to do that job and you don't want to do that job, then that's not enough, right?
Let me piggyback on that too. But when you go in and say, is it something I've done? Be willing to hear that truth because a lot of people are unwilling to hear that thing because they're like, well, it's not me. They don't. And then when they hear the truth, you may have to go, I didn't think about that, and be mature enough to walk away from there and say, I'm going to investigate that in myself.
And then can you even take it further? You're just opening a pathway for conversation.
Yeah.
Is there anything I've done? Says, no. He might at that point, or she might say, no, it's just something I'm going through. And you say, can I pray for you? Whatever.
Right.
And so what you're doing is you're given an opportunity there for God to move. And if you're a person that believes in prayer, or you can do it like a story in the Bible, I think it's so funny. In 2 Kings chapter 2, the prophet is going somewhere, and some young lads come out, and they say, hey, Baldy, oh, Baldy, Baldy. And I love what it says there in 2 Kings chapter 2. It says, he cursed them in the name of the Lord. Now, I teach something very similar to this. And then 2 bears came out of the woods and devoured these lads. And it said, specifically, 2 female bears. Okay, take that for whatever it's worth. But anyway, they come out and they eat them up. And I know
I don't know why that's funny. I don't know why. I think because we have cartoon minds, it's not funny.
Well, it's not funny at all. But the point I want to make, forgive me for laughing, I'm over caffeine today. The story's funny because I'm just going, that
story's crazy.
That should be in the Bible.
That's why it shouldn't be right. That's why. Yeah, it's
comes out of nowhere.
Disbelief.
But the point I'm wanting to make is he prayed. He prayed with faith. He used his spiritual authority, and God took care of the problem. Yeah. And I just want to say that because I believe that prayer is powerful. And if you pray over something long enough, very often God will take care of the problem without your intervening.
But just like Vince said, and God is the ultimate boss. If you pray and then God gives you instructions, you got to do it.
As you're praying for somebody, you're like, God, them.
Yeah.
And then God's like, no. You.
Well,
go back for self-reflection.
There's a verse I wanted to use today. It's Psalms 139:23. It says, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me in the way of everlasting.
That's the attitude to have.
I think that's being honest with yourself and saying, God, man, there's stuff that's going on. And I think sometimes if you do that, and I'm not saying in all circumstances, you may not have to have those conversations, where God gives you an introspective on yourself, but it may even give you an opportunity to say, no, that I'm not, it may give you a clear check to have a further conversation where you can bring in some other Christian principles, which I do believe if we're out there talking to you, you're most likely a Christian. And these are things that could apply to you. But I do think that as we're going there, I think it's probably, Pastor, you've said this before, and I've heard you say it many a times, that marriages or relationships don't fail because of too much communication. They fail from lack of communication. Yep. And that's any relationship, all the way from the most supreme, which is Christ and us, and then our wives, and then all the way down. I think there has to be communication in relationships. And I think that people get frustrated with God, but I'm like, are you talking to him?
Yeah.
Because I think communication with God is huge.
Going back, Josh, too, I want to point something out. Going back to the Christian realm again, talking to Christians out there today, the Bible is very explicit when it says, to bless those who persecute you, bless those who are, not good to you. And we got to realize that as Christians, we're not just living this life for ourselves to see that we're edified and that we get good things, but very often there are people out there that the only way they know how to relate to others is in a nasty, mean, crude way. That's just, from their background, from the way they were raised. And I think sometimes God honors us by saying, you know what, I'm going to bring this toxic person into your life. Someone that's going to, they insult you, they persecute you, and I'm going to bring them into your life specifically because I trust you. Everybody else can't put up with them. They either cancel them, put them out of their life, or they come back at them with other insults. I trust you to be kind to them, even though they're being mean to you, because there's no other way that they will ever experience the love of Christ except through you.
But there's a lot of leeway with that too, because it depends on where people are at in life. Right. Like, let's say somebody who I've known, for years and years and years says, I'm down on my luck, and I know that they have a drug problem and some stuff, and they say, hey, can I come live with you? I'm going to say, no, you can't come live with me. I have my 2 little girls. It's not going to work out. But I can help them get into a program, right? So like, there's limits. You have to use wisdom, a lot of wisdom, and you have to use just common sense.
Yeah, but going back to what I said, and I've used this example before, way back in the day, it was called, I think, Gene Weiner Cadillac in Bakersfield. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, something happened to my car. I had an older Cadillac. I took it into the dealership to get it fixed. And they gave me a loaner. In those days, one of their bragging rights was, we give you a loaner. They gave me a piece of junk for a loaner, and it didn't set well with me. They happened to have a service manager, the guy over everything, really, really a grouchy, mean person. And so I went back to complain about the loaner, and he did not like it. He was in my face. You get whatever we have, blah, 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 blah. And so I said, okay, I weathered it. And so finally my car was fixed. I went down there. I thought, wow, I don't have to deal with these people any longer. They were bringing my fixed car up, and they wrecked it again on the way back up.
Wow. And
I'm sitting there, and I was just really upset, going, oh. And so me and this guy had some words, this manager, and he said, well, I'm too bad. Accidents happen, blah, blah, blah. I went home, and I was in prayer, and I know God told me. He said, I want you to take a gift to this man who's persecuting you, being mean to you. Bring a gift to him. He's got a notorious reputation for being mean in town. I hope he's not alive yet listening to this broadcast. So I went home, and I found, whether it was right or wrong, this real nice gold pink set that some ink pen set. It was a nice set with a wooden box, and it's all I had. And so I went back and I asked to see him, and he came out and said, "What do you want?" You know, he was ready to fight. And I said, "Sir, I want to apologize for my behavior. You're doing the best you can do, and I'm really sorry. And I went home and prayed for you because I know you're in a real tough position. And I felt like God told me to give you this gift, and just an appreciation of what you do." Honestly, I stood there and watched this very hard, mean man. Tears rolled down his face. He said, "Thank you, that's nice." He turned and walked away. He was not used to people doing that. And I think very often there are people out there that's going to insult every Christian around. And when you are willing to take it on the head, God will move you into that situation and say, be kind to them. They need to experience the love of Christ. And I'm going to believe that you're going to do this for me. So it's a great honor.
Yeah.
And so we got to see this, reframe this from the spiritual side, I think, and see that the only way we're going to have our character change is by being placed in very difficult situations.
And it's hard to take it on the head. Because I think some people use the fact that, and you know, people know that you're a Christian or a believer, they want to turn that against you and say, well, aren't you like, shouldn't you be nicer in this situation? You know what I'm talking about.
Well, so when I left my previous employer before I came into the church 30 years ago, they asked me to stay to hire somebody to replace myself. So I said I would. And so we were in receivership, and so I did. I was working at the church. Pastor Ron graced me out. I said, "Hey, I'm going to be working over there after my hours at the church," and I did. And I was getting paid what I got paid when I was there until a new CFO came on, and he called me in his office. Never met this man before, and he says, "So do you feel good taking this check?" And I go, "Oh, I don't know what you mean." He goes, "Well, that's a lot of money for the time you're putting in." I go, "Well, I never said I was supposed to get paid that. You guys kept paying me that. But if you feel that that's not worth it, I made a commitment to be here till I did a job, and I'm going to do that job." Now, I think it was a test because they knew I was in the ministry. I was like doing dual role.
Going to see what you were going to do.
Yeah, and so it was funny because the next day, the human resource director, a guy named David Aquino, he's the human resource director at Jeremiah Farms right now, gave me the check. And I go, "Oh, probably, cut it in half." He goes, "No, he didn't." But I mean, it was just me saying, "I don't care. I mean, you guys are the ones that did this." And I would go, "But if you want to change your mind, go ahead." But it was one of the first times that I saw God move in a realm where I was just saying,
cool.
I'm just going to take on change because I said I would do something. But,
Yeah.
and I thought it was more important for my character to do what I said.
There you go. More important for your character.
And I never had another conversation with that man in my entire life.
Yeah.
That's great.
Never did.
You never know the impression you made.
never know. I just.
But going back, last night I had a really odd thing, not odd thing, but I don't always do it. Very often, it helps me to be patient with people, realizing we don't know what they're going through. Let's say I'm in the supermarket behind someone and they're being really grouchy, they're being a difficult, toxic person. But what I might not know, they lost their child maybe a year ago and it's the birthday. See, I don't know that. Last night when I went to bed, I was thanking God for my blessings. And I got slight anemia from having cancer, and I'm always cold, and I got a nice warm bed, and I was appreciating it. And I said to God, "God, thank you for this warm bed." Because you know what? I realize there's brothers and sisters in the Lord all throughout the world right now. Some are in prison. They don't have a nice warm bed to go to. And God, I just want to tell you something. I don't take for granted the blessings you're giving me. But the same token, with the blessings you've given me, let me use them as a platform to pray for and help these other people. And so very often we got to keep in mind, we don't know what people are going through. When I was told that I was going to die, I was only given 3 or 4 years to live. I remember a few months after that, I was really in a nasty mood one day, knowing that the doctor said I was going to die. And I almost felt like heralding out this message: don't mess with me today. Don't mess with me, man. You know what? My life is limited, and just don't want to mess with me today. So we got to keep in mind that not everybody not everybody may be as blessed as you are. And so what's the old saying? Walk a mile in their moccasins first. Mm-hmm. There we go. We're politically incorrect there.
No, you're fine.
Walk a mile in their shoes.
Right.
So try to understand people, and give them the benefit of the doubt, and it'll help you with your patience, I think.
So I want to just kind of end here with...
I got one more thing to say before you end, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, if you hear one thing we're saying today, I want you to hear something, and that is take the high road. When reacting or responding to toxic people, take the high road. Don't lower yourself to their level. I heard a pastor a long time ago talk about the eagle. Eagles can fly as high as 20,000 feet.
Wow.
He said 30, but I don't know about 30. Some birds do. There's some that go 32,000 feet up there where the airliners are at, you know. But this pastor said years ago, I can't remember everything, but he said crows are an enemy to the eagles. And sometimes they'll start just following a crow, pecking at him, just giving him a hard time. And they said, instead of the eagle turn around to fight the crow, said all they do is take it up to a higher level to where the crow can't go. He can't get up to that level. And they take it up there and they have no problems. So as Christians who have been blessed, we want to take it to a higher level. This is a challenge to deal with toxic people. And so I think we have so much more to say, Josh. We really didn't talk a lot about relationships. If it's your spouse or if it's your family that you can't, you know, we got a lot to say yet.
Well, can I answer? I wrote down 4 of the verses. The Bible, David said, I hide God's word in my heart, so at the appropriate time may come out. I always keep Proverbs 15:1 around. It says, a soft answer turns away wrath.
There you go.
In Romans 12:8, it says, if possible, as it depends on you, be peaceable with all.
Yeah.
And then it goes on in Matthew 7:12. It says, so whatever you wish that others do for you, do to them.
There you go.
And if you come prepared with those in your heart that you can fall back on, those are tools in your tool
What do you want
belt.
people to do for you when you're having a bad day?
Yeah.
Well, what do you want them to do? You want them to probably say, I'll pray for you. You'd like them not to take it personally because, you know, you go home and go, oh, you know, I know, Josh, you want to end this thing, and I'm ready to end.
I know, it's
There's
fine.
so much to talk about yet because if it's your spouse, you're in a whole different world now.
Yeah, no, I don't have to end. I just
it's
figured
time,
it was
dude.
time. So
It's time.
the one thing I wanted to leave you guys with, I think this is very applicable to all relationships, is the serenity prayer that Pastor Thomas talked about. But I wrote it down just so I wouldn't get it wrong. But God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. So accept the things you can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that if we were to hold on to that idea, to realize we can change ourselves. The verse that you gave in Psalms, Tom,
Yes.
that was a verse about changing yourself, about looking inward first. Then it's much easier to get along, I think. With
I love that. What if we go into a situation during the day where we see toxic people, instead of saying, how can I correct their behavior? What if I ask the question, how will this help me become a more deep person?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, love it.
All right, well, guys, so thank you guys again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Love you guys.
Bye.
You got your mama's sunshine. You got your daddy's rain. You're like a piece of heaven in a hurricane. And it's bubbling over like sweet champagne. You got your mama's sunshine.